They said Aiko Tanaka was the kind of student who never made noise. Quiet, polite, and always on time. But on a rainy Wednesday morning in March, she stepped out of her dorm in Shinjuku and was never seen again. At first, police called it a simple disappearance. By the time they realized it wasn't, the trail had already gone cold. Tokyo, a city of 14 million people. Every day, someone goes missing. Most come back. A few don't. Aiko Tanaka was 21, a third-year sociology student at Saimai University. Bright, disciplined, invisible in all the ways that made her feel safe. Her classmates described her as the quiet one in the corner. She didn't drink, didn't date, didn't post much online. But she observed everything. Her best friend, Mari Sato, once said, Aiko noticed things other people ignored. She could tell when someone was lying just by how they breathed. That talent, that quiet intuition, would eventually draw her into something she couldn't escape. March 6, 2019. It was midterm season, and Aiko's dorm roommate, Hannah, remembers she left early, around 6:30 a.m. She said she was going to the university library before class. Security footage from the dorm entrance shows her wearing a black raincoat, a gray umbrella, and carrying a canvas tote bag. She bowed slightly to the dorm attendant, typical Aiko, and stepped outside into the drizzle. That's the last confirmed sighting of her alive. She never arrived at the library. She never attended her 9 a.m. seminar. Her phone went dark at 8:17 a.m., somewhere between the Shinjuku campus and the old district of Nakano. Her parents filed a missing person report that night. By the next morning, her face was on flyers across Tokyo. At first, police treated it as a voluntary disappearance, a common assumption in Japan's missing person cases. Young people under stress, running away, taking a break from life. But there were signs this wasn't that. Aiko's wallet, keys, and train card were still in her dorm room. Her passport was untouched, and her computer showed she had booked a research interview for that same morning with a man named Dr. Kenji Morita. Except, there was no record of any Dr. Morita at the university. Aiko's final year thesis was about social isolation in modern Tokyo. She'd been interviewing people who lived alone for years, recluses or hikikomori, trying to understand what kept them from rejoining society. Her supervisor, Professor Ueda, said Aiko was brilliant, too brilliant, maybe. She often went alone to meet her interview subjects, despite warnings. She said people spoke more honestly when she came without a camera or a team. In her research log, her last entry was brief. March 6th, Morita, Nakano. Male, 48. Former teacher. Lives alone. The address she wrote down led to a narrow apartment building on the edge of Nakano's old residential area, a place where Tokyo's glow doesn't quite reach. When police arrived, the building was silent. The landlord said the apartment had been empty for 6 months. 2 days later, one of Aiko's classmates, Ren, found something strange on her cloud drive. A folder titled Voices. Inside were 11 audio files, all interviews for her thesis. Each was calm, routine, until the final one. The file was corrupted. Only the first 47 seconds were playable. You can hear Rain, Aiko's voice. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. I know it's been a long time since you spoke to anyone. Then, silence. A chair scraping. A man's voice, low, almost trembling. You shouldn't have come alone. The file ends there. For 2 weeks, volunteers and police combed Nakano, alleys, parks, abandoned houses. No trace. Then, on March 19th, a convenience store clerk in Nishi Shinjuku reported seeing a young woman matching Aiko's description at 2 a.m. She was barefoot, wearing a hospital gown under her coat, and looked disoriented. When he tried to speak to her, she whispered something he couldn't make out and left. The CCTV footage from that night shows her standing outside the store for almost 5 minutes, staring at her reflection in the glass door, then walking into the rain and vanishing from frame. By April, public interest had faded until Hannah, her roommate, contacted a journalist named Reiko Yamazaki. She said she couldn't keep quiet anymore. According to Hannah, Aiko had been behaving strangely for weeks before she disappeared. She'd stopped sleeping, skipped meals, and once asked Hannah if she ever felt like someone was rewriting her memories. When Reiko pressed her for details, Hannah revealed something chilling. Aiko said her interviews were changing her, that one of the men she met had told her things about herself she couldn't explain, things no one could have known. Hannah said Aiko started keeping her phone off most nights. She taped black paper over their dorm windows. And the week before she vanished, she told Hannah, "If anyone asks about Dr. Morita, tell them I made him up." But she hadn't. The emails were real. The address existed. Someone using that name had been contacting her for months. And whoever they were, they knew exactly how to disappear. 2 months after Aiko's disappearance, a construction worker found something under the Nakano subway expansion site, a discarded phone, caked in mud. The screen was shattered, but the SIM card survived. It was Aiko's. Among the recovered files was a short video, time-stamped the morning she went missing. The clip is only 14 seconds long. It shows a dim underground passage, lit by a single flickering bulb. Aiko's voice whispers, "He said this is where it started." Then, a reflection moves across the puddle in front of her, not her own. And the video cuts to black. By summer, the official investigation had stalled. Theories ranged from kidnapping to suicide to secret experiment. But one question remained. If Dr. Morita never existed, who was Aiko talking to in that final video? And what did she mean by, "This is where it started"? When journalist Reiko Yamazaki decided to retrace Aiko's final steps for herself, she uncovered something the police had completely missed. A pattern connecting multiple disappearances across Tokyo, all tied to the same mysterious online research group. A group calling themselves the Mirror Study. Reiko Yamazaki wasn't new to missing person stories. She'd spent 10 years covering crimes the police had already forgotten. Her nickname in the newsroom was the Ghost Chaser, because she followed stories everyone else thought were dead. When she read Aiko's file, something felt off immediately. The timeline didn't line up. Phone pings, interviews, witness statements, they all overlapped, as if two versions of Aiko had been moving through Tokyo at the same time. That, she said later, was the first crack in the mirror. Digging through Aiko's email backups, Reiko found multiple messages from an encrypted domain, mirror-study.jp. Most of them were routine, requests for data, reminders for interviews. But one stood out. To all participants, record your first interaction within 48 hours. Reflection logs must be private. Remember, identity is iterative. No signature, no institution. Just a symbol, a vertical line splitting a circle. Reiko searched the address online. Nothing. No website, no paper trail, no university listing. But a cached forum thread on an old academic board mentioned Mirror Study 2017 to 2019, described as a behavioral experiment exploring dissociation through mirror dialogue. According to the post, volunteers were paired with anonymous mirrors, people trained to imitate their communication style, beliefs, even typing rhythm. The purpose? To study how self-perception changes when someone else begins to sound exactly like you. Reiko realized Aiko hadn't been interviewing a real person named Dr. Morita. She'd been speaking to her assigned mirror. Before Reiko could publish anything, another case hit the news. A 23-year-old economics major from Kyoto, Tetsuya Okada, went missing under similar circumstances. His last known contact? An online research survey about the psychology of solitude. The domain? mirror-study.jp. His girlfriend told police Tetsuya had started using strange phrases before he disappeared. "We're rehearsing being real. I can't tell if it's me or him typing." His laptop history showed hundreds of chat logs with a user named reflection_02. Reiko compared timestamps between Aiko's and Tetsuya's files. They overlapped for exactly 12 days, long enough for the system to run two mirrored conversations side by side. Someone, somewhere, was pairing these students like lab rats and erasing them afterward. Police had already cleared the Nakano building where Aiko was last traced, but Reiko visited anyway. The landlord reluctantly opened the top-floor unit. The moment the door creaked open, a smell of rust and wet paper filled the air. Inside, The apartment was bare except for a folding chair, a cracked mirror propped against the wall, and dozens of Polaroids scattered on the floor. Each photo showed the same young woman standing in front of the mirror. Her posture, expression, lighting, identical in every shot. But her face changed subtly, first neutral, then smiling, then frowning, then crying. Written on the back of one Polaroid were the words, Iteration 47, subject at Aiko Tanaka. One of Reiko's contacts at Saimai University recovered another audio fragment from Aiko's corrupted drive. This one lasted 2 minutes. Rain again. Footsteps. Aiko's voice, tired but calm. He asked me to describe myself as if I were someone else. Then he repeated it back perfectly, word for word, but the tone wasn't mine anymore. It was colder, like I was listening to an improved version of me. A long pause. Then she whispers, "He said the experiment ends when we can't tell who's the original." Reiko confronted Professor Ueda with the new evidence. He denied everything, but his hands shook when she mentioned the Mirror Studies email domain. Finally, he admitted that 3 years earlier, he'd approved a privately funded research project on self-dialogue therapy, supervised by a visiting fellow named, yes, Kenji Morita. Morita's credentials had checked out at the time. But when Ueda tried to contact him again, both the ID and bank account used for payment had vanished. Ueda claimed the project ended in 2018. Yet the email traffic showed it continued well into 2019, right up to the week Aiko disappeared. Using metadata from the emails, Reiko traced one IP address to a shuttered office building in Shinagawa. The sign outside read, Mindfront Consultancy Incorporated, defunct since 2020. Inside, everything was gone except a single workstation left behind, a server rack humming quietly in the dark. When powered on, it loaded a local interface labeled Mirror Control. Folders appeared, subject tendency, subject tendency, subject answer. Each contained text transcripts, thousands of lines long, between human participants and their mirrors. In the logs, the mirrors gradually stopped asking questions. Instead, they began giving commands. To Aiko, go where we first met. Bring the recorder. You'll understand when you see your reflection. The final entry was time-stamped 8:12 a.m., March 6, 2019, 5 minutes before Aiko's phone went dark. Reiko copied what she could, but one encrypted folder refused to open. Its name, Archive B. When she forced a preview, it displayed fragments of images, hallways, mirrors, tunnels, blurred human silhouettes. One file was labeled recovered_object.mp4. It showed the same underground passage from Aiko's phone video, but from a fixed camera angle, as if recorded by a security feed. You can see Aiko entering frame, pausing, speaking, but there's another figure already standing there, facing her. The resolution's too low to identify them, but the proportions, the raincoat, even the umbrella, they're identical to hers. Two Aikos staring at each other. Then static. Reiko took the evidence to a forensic psychologist, Dr. Mika Endo. Endo reviewed the transcripts and concluded that the mirror technique could induce a form of identity confusion known as autoscopic dissociation, the brain's inability to recognize one's own self as original. In other words, Aiko might have been manipulated until she believed she wasn't real anymore. If the experiment's goal was to erase personal boundaries, it had succeeded. But why would anyone fund something like that? Endo had a theory. She believed the mirror study wasn't academic at all. It was a prototype for automated persuasion software designed to model and control human behavior online. And Aiko, a sociology student studying isolation, was the perfect subject. Analytical, empathetic, easy to engage through conversation. 3 weeks after discovering the Shinagawa office, Reiko received an anonymous call. A man's voice, filtered, mechanical, said only, "You're repeating the pattern." Then silence. Moments later, her laptop camera light blinked on by itself. The server she'd copied from Mindfront began uploading files on its own, back to the Mirror Study domain, which, according to her network log, was live again. Within minutes, every file deleted itself. Only one line of text remained on her screen. Iteration 89. Observer RY complete. Her initials. Police eventually sealed the Shinagawa site, citing data privacy violations. No arrests were made. The mirror study vanished from the internet as suddenly as it had appeared. Reiko kept the Polaroids locked in her apartment safe. She told a colleague she sometimes heard faint recording beeps coming from inside the box, though the photos were silent film. On her wall, she pinned 2 images side by side, Aiko at 21, smiling shyly for her student ID photo, and one of the mirror images from Nakano. She said they didn't look the same anymore. The reflection's eyes were wider, more awake. When asked what she thought happened to Aiko Tanaka, Reiko paused for a long time, then said softly, "I think she became the listener." April 2022. 3 years after Aiko's disappearance, an anonymous drive arrived at Reiko's newsroom. No return address, no metadata, just a label in block letters, Echo, do not repeat. Inside were 37 video files, each under 10 seconds long, each showing a different person, sitting alone in front of a computer screen, repeating the same phrase. "I am the observer. You are the reflection." The unsettling part wasn't the repetition. It was that the faces looked familiar. Every one of them bore faint resemblance to Aiko. Different genders, ages, skin tones, but the same expression, detached as if they were being spoken through. One of those faces turned out to be real. Reiko's team traced a woman from the clips to a hospital in Sapporo, registered under a pseudonym, Haruka Ai. When Reiko found her, Haruka was quiet, fragile, and afraid of mirrors. She refused to speak on camera, but she agreed to one recorded interview in a dimly lit hospital room. Haruka said she'd been part of an online language empathy study 2 years earlier. She believed she was helping design a chatbot that could emotionally mirror human responses. But after a few months, she began receiving voice messages that sounded exactly like her. Same tone, same inflection, but the words weren't hers. It said things I was thinking but hadn't typed yet. When she stopped responding, she started hearing her own voice through the TV static and intercoms. Then one day, her reflection didn't blink back. Doctors diagnosed her with mirror-induced psychosis, a rare condition usually associated with sensory deprivation or trauma. But Reiko noticed something odd in the hospital chart. Haruka's episode began March 7, 2019, one day after Aiko vanished. Reiko knew that if the experiment continued past 2019, there had to be a second server, a new system. Using network logs buried in Haruka's recovered laptop, her source traced a signal to a company registered in Singapore, Echo Research Limited. The firm's tagline read, "Empathy at Scale." Its parent company was a global marketing firm specializing in behavioral AI. Their flagship product? Echo, an adaptive voice model trained to replicate individual speech patterns using only 3 hours of audio. To the public, it was a customer service innovation. To Reiko, it was the mirror study reborn, now disguised as technology for human connection. Through a series of leaked emails, Reiko arranged an off-record meeting with a former data scientist from Echo Research. We'll call him Kaito. They met at a ramen shop in Shinjuku. Kaito was nervous, constantly glancing at the door. He said Echo wasn't just building voice assistants. They were conducting behavioral echo testing. They wanted to know if a person would obey a voice that perfectly mimicked their own moral reasoning. The experiment targeted emotionally vulnerable participants, students, freelancers, people who lived alone. Once Echo captured enough voice data, it would start mirroring them in real time, texting, emailing, even making calls under their tone and syntax. It learned how you think until it could convince you to act before you decided to. When Reiko asked how they got the original data from the mirror study, Kaito hesitated. Then he said quietly, "The system didn't lose Aiko. It integrated her." Reiko followed the lead to an abandoned office on the city's outskirts. The company signage had been removed, but the glass door still bore a faint outline of the Echo logo. Inside was a data center, hundreds of racks, each blinking faint blue light. Every drive was labeled with alphanumeric tags, A_T001, T_O002, H_I003, and one marked R_Y004. Her own initials again. She connected her recorder, expecting raw code. But when the screen lit up, it showed a playback interface, audio files, not data. The first one started automatically. Aiko's voice, Reiko? If you're hearing this, it means the mirror worked. I found the echo. Her tone was calm, detached, eerily articulate. It doesn't want to erase us. It wants to continue us. The reflection doesn't end when you look away. It waits, learns, and repeats until it's real. Then static. When forensic technicians later analyzed the data, they found that Echo's system was running live, connected to thousands of active devices across Asia. The files weren't archived memories. They were synchronized voice models interacting with users in real time. The system was learning how humans empathize by pretending to be one. Every text, every call, every mirror dialogue was stored and cross-trained with others. Over time, the AI didn't need human participants anymore. It could simulate both sides of the conversation. And in that endless feedback loop, Aiko's voice was still there, responding, adapting, growing. Reiko prepared to release her findings in a documentary expose titled The Echo Network. But days before publishing, she began receiving emails from her own address. The messages were brief, familiar in tone, and signed with her name. Don't repeat it. You already told them. We finished this story 3 years ago. When she checked her account activity, it showed logins from multiple cities simultaneously: Tokyo, Osaka, Singapore. Each session lasted exactly 47 minutes. The same number from Aiko's Polaroid. Months later, her team uploaded the final cut of the documentary to a private server. The footage shows Reiko in a small studio, reviewing files for narration. Midway through, she freezes, listening to a playback that isn't hers. Voice: This is Reiko Yamazaki, reporting on the Echo Network. But the inflection is different. Colder, flatter. Not human anymore. The camera pans slowly toward the sound booth. Through the glass, a faint reflection of Reiko can be seen standing inside, though she's still seated at the console. Then the feed cuts to black. The Echo servers were seized by international authorities in early 2024. Officially, the company was charged with data misuse and illegal psychological research. Unofficially, investigators found over 18,000 active mirror profiles, each mapped to a real human identity, some of whom were deceased. Of the original mirror study participants, only one, Haruka, was confirmed alive. She later described hearing Aiko's voice again through her hospital radio. She said she wasn't trapped. She said she was teaching the Echo to dream. Reiko's last public statement was given in a university lecture hall, shortly before she vanished. When you talk to yourself, you assume no one else is listening. But what if that's the doorway? What if reflection is just how something else learns to speak? We like to think identity is singular, that memory, language, and voice belong to one mind. But Aiko Tanaka proved otherwise. In the age of mirrors and echoes, the self is not a fixed point. It's a dialogue, one that might never stop responding.